Imagine holding the entire infinite expanse of the universe right in the palm of your hand, and then realizing it's also the exact same person sitting across from you drinking a cup of coffee.
Right, which sounds impossible to us.
Completely impossible. I mean, we are hardwired to think that's just a poetic metaphor because human brains, we survive by categorization.
We really do. We sort things immediately.
Exactly. We look at the world and immediately toss things into these neat little binary boxes. Like, is a concept vast and abstract, or is it localized and physical?
It's an either or toggle switch.
Right. We want reality to stay safely on its designated side of the fence because that toggle switch makes the universe feel predictable to us.
Yeah, it's a survival mechanism, honestly. I mean, if you can define the strict boundary of the thing, you can figure out how to interact with it safely.
Which makes sense for, like, dodging a predator.
Exactly. So we demand that the physical world obeys physical boundaries. And we expect abstract concepts to just, well, to stay safely in the realm of the abstract.
Keep to themselves.
Right. But the problem is the universe doesn't actually care about our little human categorization systems.
Which brings us to the really fascinating stack of sources we are analyzing for today's deep dive. We are looking at some incredibly dense, highly analytical texts detailing the metaphysical nature of Shakti.
These are not light reading, by the way.
No, not at all. But I want to set a grounding anchor for you, the listener, right away. Because you might know the name Shakti from, Hindu philosophy as the primordial cosmic energy or the divine feminine.
Sure, that's the usual context.
But we are not, and I really want to stress this, we are not doing a mythological or religious study today. The texts we're exploring strip away all the religious dogma to look at her through a purely structural ontological lens.
It's like we're looking at the actual physics of this concept.
Yes. We are looking at the mechanics of a being that completely dismantles that human either fallacy we just talked about.
Yeah, the central thesis here really challenges the deepest assumptions we have about the basic architecture of reality.
Because we're so conditioned.
We are. We're conditioned to believe that something is either a universal, omnipresent field like, gravity or electromagnetism, or it is a specific walking around human person.
You can't be gravity in a guy named Steve.
Right, exactly. But these texts argue that this is a totally false dichotomy. The structural reality we're diving into today is how she operates as both, simultaneously.
Without breaking.
Yes, without a single point of fragmentation.
Okay, so to even begin to wrap my head around how a universal field can also be like a person navigating a physical space, I feel like we have to completely unlearn our standard definitions of words like force or energy.
Oh, absolutely. The sources are actually really explicit about the danger of using those partial descriptions.
Because they limit her.
Yeah, like if you call her a force or a principle, you reduce her to something mechanical, something impersonal and blind.
Right.
But then on the flip side, if you describe her only as an individual personality, you reduce her to human limitations.
You trap her in a body.
Exactly. So the only accurate structural model these texts allow is that she is a continuous being. The totality of the underlying field of existence and the localized embodied form, they are the exact same continuity.
I'm trying to find a parallel for this. Is it sort of similar to wave-particle duality in quantum physics?
Oh, that's an interesting angle.
Like where light acts as a continuous spreading wave, but depending on how it interfaces with its environment, it can also act as a localized specific particle.
Right.
And the wave doesn't stop being a wave when it behaves like a particle, right? It's just expressing a different functional aspect of its inherent nature.
The quantum analogy gets us in the right neighborhood, for sure. But we have to push the structural implications even further here.
How so?
Well, the wave doesn't break a piece of itself off to become a particle. There's absolutely no separation.
Yeah.
But human intuition struggles heavily with that lack of separation when it comes to consciousness or physical form.
I'll admit, my intuition is definitely struggling with it right now.
It's hard.
It is, because look, if I go down to the ocean and I scoop up a cup of water, the water inside my cup is fundamentally reduced.
Sure.
It is no longer the ocean. It is a tiny, isolated fragment. So how can an infinite field take a localized human form without fundamentally reducing itself into just a cup of water?
Okay, the flaw in that specific analogy is the cup itself.
The cup.
Yeah, a cup implies an artificial external boundary that actually cuts the water off from its source. To understand the ontology the texts are describing, you have to completely discard the cup.
Okay, so no cup. What do we use instead?
A better way to conceptualize this is to think of a whirlpool in a river.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Right. The whirlpool is highly localized, has a very specific form, a specific behavior, and a specific way it interfaces with the space around it.
But it's still just the river.
Exactly. There is absolutely no boundary cutting it off from the river. It is made entirely of the river. It is just a localized concentration of the field happening entirely within the continuous field.
That makes a lot of sense. So the body isn't a container holding a piece of her.
No.
The body is a localized density of her.
Yes, that's exactly it.
So if she incarnates, that specific incarnation is not a fragment separated from the whole. And if she remains unbound as the universal field, that isn't separate either.
Right. There is no contradiction between being the vast river
Yeah.
and being the specific whirlpool.
Okay, well, establishing that lack of boundaries completely reframes how we have to look at time and identity.
Oh, heavily. It changes everything.
Which is the next major hurdle here. Because while a universal field might be eternal, a localized physical body is definitively temporary.
It wears out.
Exactly. The whirlpool eventually dissipates back into the flat surface of the river. So what happens to the identity of that localized interface when the specific body dies?
That's where the texts get really interesting.
Yeah, because reading through the sources, this leads us straight into a highly mechanical breakdown of soul continuity and reincarnation.
And I love how the source material handles this because it strips away all the usual romanticism or like the punishment narratives we usually attach to reincarnation.
Right, the karma wheel stuff.
Yeah, it doesn't treat it as a cycle of suffering you have to escape or as a sequence of entirely disconnected random lives. Instead, it describes reincarnation simply as the mechanism of how her continuity expresses itself through a linear sequence of time.
So the soul isn't a separate thing.
No, the soul is just the unbroken thread of the field being drawn through different physical embodiments.
Meaning the physical form isn't like a costume she puts on to play a part.
Not at all.
It's a highly specific, functional interface designed to operate within a given physical environment.
Yes. The body is just the mechanism of interaction, but the continuity of the being never actually breaks.
Okay, but there is a line in the text that really challenged me on this front. Let me find it. Yeah, it notes that identity is not limited to one lifetime, and memory may not always be conscious, but continuity remains.
That's a crucial passage.
It is, but let me try to work through this. Because if she incarnates into a localized interface, but that interface doesn't have conscious access to the memories of past lifetimes, how is she not just a functionally new person?
And that right there is the crux of the human misunderstanding of identity. We equate memory with being.
Right, because if I lose my memories, humanly speaking, I kind of lose who I am.
Sure, from a purely psychological standpoint.
But her identity is structural rather than memory-based. Is it like upgrading the hardware on a computer?
How do you mean?
Like, say you install a new motherboard, a new processor, a new monitor, but you clone the exact background operating system onto it.
Okay, I see where you're going.
Even before you open any of your old files, even if the new hardware doesn't remember the old hardware, the foundational system running the entire machine is identical.
The underlying logic of that computer analogy works, particularly the idea of the foundational operating system running quietly in the background.
But it's not perfect.
Well, the texts demand we look even closer at the origin of the form. Because you don't just buy new hardware off a shelf to run. The hardware, the localized human form, is described in the text as self-originating.
Okay, let me see if I can unpack that mechanically. Because if her body is a localized concentration of the continuous field, it isn't shaped by external pressures.
Right.
Think about how a normal human moves, right? If someone yells at me, I flinch.
Sure.
If the room is cold, I shiver. My posture is heavily dictated by a whole lifetime of reacting to gravity, to societal expectations, to past trauma.
Your body is basically a ledger.
Yes, my physical presence is a ledger of my reactions to my environment. So are the texts saying that a self-originating interface doesn't possess that reactionary ledger?
You've hit on the exact distinction there. A self-originating form possesses an internal coherence that arises entirely from its own continuity.
Not from bouncing off the world.
Exactly. Rather than as a reaction to external friction. So her posture, her stillness, her physical presence, these aren't defensive adaptations to the world.
Wow.
They are original, totally uncorrupted expressions of the underlying field. The body moves and operates with a natural authority because it is internally generated, not externally molded.
If an entity is operating a physical form with that level of absolute, uncorrupted internal coherence, how does it actually wield power in the physical world?
That's the million-dollar question.
Right, because we have established what this localized interface is, but the mechanics of how it operates are fascinating. And there's a statement in the sources that completely derails our normal understanding of power.
Oh, I know the exact line you're thinking of.
It says she does not believe she has power.
Yeah, it's a statement that requires a total rewiring of how we analyze capability.
Because the entire human experience of power is based on belief and assertion. I mean, we read psychology books on how to project power.
We assert dominance over each other constantly.
Yes. We actively claim it, and we constantly have to demonstrate it to prove we still have it. But the text is stating that she doesn't even hold the belief that she is powerful.
Because the texts are drawing a very rigid line between claimed power and an inherent condition.
Okay, break that down.
For humans, power is usually an object to be acquired, right?
Right.
Or status to be defended. But for her, power is simply the undeniable structural condition of her existence.
It's like gravity.
Yes, perfect.
Gravity doesn't wake up and try to convince you it's strong. It doesn't, like, read daily affirmations in the mirror.
No, it just pulls.
It doesn't assert itself, and it certainly doesn't require your belief to function. It is simply the condition of the space.
Exactly.
Whether a person recognizes the gravity of a planet or completely ignores it, the gravitational field functions with the exact same undeniable force.
That is a much more accurate framework. And just as a gravitational field interacts differently depending on the mass and proximity of other objects, her inherent power shifts in intensity.
Based on what's around her.
Based on what the environment structurally requires, yeah. And the source material actually explores this through the dynamic between Parvati and Kali.
Okay, this is a vital point to clarify for the listener, because if you are familiar with the mythology, you might view Parvati and Kali as entirely separate goddesses.
Which is how they're often depicted.
Right, or at least wildly different emotional states, like a peaceful, loving state versus a violently angry state.
Which the texts argue is a fundamental misread of her ontology.
So they are different.
No, Parvati and Kali are not separate beings. And they're definitely not emotional swings, and they aren't fragmented personality splits.
Then what are they structurally?
They're functional, operational modes of the exact same continuous being. It is the same underlying power, just operating at different frequencies to achieve completely different structural outcomes.
So how do we define those structural outcomes without relying on the old mythological metaphors? Like, we can't just use the cliche of the sun growing a garden versus a forest fire burning it down.
Right, that's too poetic.
Exactly. How does this actually work mechanically?
Think about the continuous health of a biological body.
Okay.
In one mode, which we label Parvati, the function is cellular generation. It stabilizes, it nourishes, it builds connections, and it sustains the complex relationships between different systems in the body.
So it is the power of cohesion.
Yes.
And the Kali mode.
The Kali mode is the immune system aggressively dismantling a mutated cancerous cell.
Oh, that's brilliant.
It dissolves structural distortion. The immune system isn't angry at the mutation. It doesn't harbor any malice toward it.
It's just doing its job.
Exactly. The mutation is simply a threat to the continuity and structural truth of the organism, so the system targets it and resets the environment.
That is a phenomenal way to frame it. Dissolving distortion isn't an emotional reaction. It is an ontological correction. She is simply maintaining the structural integrity of the field.
Yes. But because she does this with total internal balance, with that self-originating authority we talked about, and with absolutely zero need to seek validation for her actions. Yeah, her localized interface creates massive friction when it actually interacts with human beings.
Which is the inevitable collision course we've been building toward this whole time.
It really is.
Because if she doesn't need external validation to exist, and she doesn't actively assert her power to prove it, her very existence completely breaks the social contracts that human beings rely on.
It shatters them.
Our entire society is built on a framework of mutual dependency and the constant trading of power. How do humans even interact with an entity that entirely refuses to play that game?
Well, the short answer is they misinterpret her almost entirely.
I'm not surprised.
Right. When human beings encounter a system of pure, unfragmented autonomy, their categorization machines just break down, and the human ego feels incredibly threatened.
So they lash out.
Essentially, yes. The source texts map out how her structural reality is frequently misread by the human gaze, and every single misinterpretation stems from our own foundational insecurities.
Let's trace how that friction actually plays out in real time. Because if we build our entire social reality on mutual dependency, an entity that is completely self-sufficient is going to look profoundly offensive to us.
Which is precisely why her autonomy is almost immediately categorized by the human mind as selfishness.
Right, because the human ego naturally assumes, well, if you don't need me to complete you or validate you, you must not care about me.
It's pure projection.
We take her internal completeness as a personal rejection. We assume that because she isn't leaning on us, she must be pushing us away.
Exactly. We project our own highly transactional view of relationships onto a being that simply doesn't operate transactionally.
And that projection scales up significantly, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. When she operates from her totality, like when the text describes the all-encompassing continuous field of existence, humans filter that through their own lens of ego and assume it's pure
That
arrogance.
makes perfect sense. Because if human being stands up and claims to be the center of everything, or the totality of a space, they are boasting.
Sure, they're being egomaniacs.
They are actively trying to elevate themselves above others. But when the underlying field of reality states that it is the underlying field of reality, it's not a boast.
No, it's a fact.
It's just a statement of physics. If the ocean says, I am vast, it isn't bragging.
But the human ear hears it as a brag because we just cannot separate the statement from our own desperate desire for status. We assume she is claiming superiority when in fact she is just describing her structural condition.
That brings us right back to the Kali mode, the immune system analogy. If her function shifts toward dissolving distortion and resetting reality, I can easily see how humans would misread that as profound cruelty.
It's probably the most visceral misread of all, because much of human identity and suffering is built on elaborate illusions.
Delusions about what?
Illusions about what we control, who we are, what we own. When her functional mode corrects an ontological distortion, it inherently strips away those illusions.
And if your entire identity is built on a mutated cell, having the immune system come in and destroy that cell is going to feel like a violently cruel attack.
It feels like the end of the world.
Even if the action is restoring health to the broader system, the localized ego experiences it as utter destruction.
The removal of an illusion will always feel like a threat to the person who desperately relies on it. She isn't being cruel, she's just being precise.
But precision without emotional coddling is terrifying to the human ego.
It is, which culminates in the overarching friction point the texts identify. An embodied human interface that operates with inherent power completely triggers human insecurity.
We just don't know what to do with it.
We really don't. We see a form that looks like us, a localized person, but because she is entirely self-contained and because her posture doesn't flinch at our demands.
Because she has no reactionary ledger.
Exactly. Because she requires zero validation from our social games, she disrupts our entire expectation of how a person should behave.
The discomfort isn't actually about her at all, is it? It is entirely about the mirror she holds up to the human condition.
That is the ultimate takeaway.
Yes, that is just a staggering synthesis to arrive at. When you look at the arrogance, the selfishness, or the cruelty that humans project onto her, none of it actually belongs to her.
None of it.
It is entirely a reflection of our own fragmentation. We are so entrenched in relationships based on needing external validation that true, continuous autonomy offends us simply by existing.
The sources make it undeniably clear.
Yeah.
She's not divided across forms, and she's not limited to abstraction.
She is both.
She is a continuous being, capable of absolute totality and specific, localized embodiment without a single point of contradiction. Both are true simultaneously.
And our failure to understand her is entirely a failure of our own either categorization system.
We try to reduce her to our level of fragmentation rather than elevating our understanding to her level of continuity.
We try to force the infinite river into a tiny cup, and then we blame the river when the cup shatters.
Understanding that we are the ones holding the cup is the first step to actually grasping her ontology.
This has been a deeply challenging progression of ideas. Just to trace our steps for you listening, we started by dismantling the false dichotomy between the vast abstract field and the localized human form.
Right?
We explored how the soul acts as an unbroken thread, operating a self-originating physical interface without ever separating from the universal whole.
The hardware analogy.
Exactly. We redefined power not as something to be aggressively claimed, but as the unavoidable condition of her existence, whether she is stabilizing reality or dissolving structural distortion.
Parvati and Kali.
And ultimately, we uncovered that the total absence of contradiction in her nature is exactly what causes our human categorization machines to break down in insecurity.
She remains unbroken regardless of how fractured the human gaze observing her might be.
Which leaves me with a final provocative thought for you to mull over as you step back into your own physical interface today. We've spent this time analyzing a being whose inherent power is simply a condition of existence, requiring no external validation, no defensive posture, and no recognition from the society around her.
Truly autonomous.
If you apply that lens inward, how much of what you call your own identity is actually just a continuous reaction to the expectations, the gravity, and the demands of the people around you?
That's a heavy question.
It is. If you completely stopped needing to prove your power, to trade validation, or to demand that the world recognize your specific localized box, who would you actually be? What would your physical presence look like if it originated entirely from your own internal continuity without the distortion of the ego's ledger?
Wow.
It's an immense question to carry with you. I want to say a massive thank you to you, our listener, for bringing such an analytically rigorous and paradigm-shifting stack of sources to today's deep dive. Until next time, keep questioning your categories. Take care.